about their company and what they have to offer our ladies to help in their homesteading journey. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. So I'd like to just jump in and say, number one, it's a privilege to be here and to present to you. And I just wanted to showcase some of the wonderful things that we have. And let me just kind of showcase to start with. If you would go to rootsandharvest.com/canning, you can learn a boatload about all the canning opportunities that we actually have for individuals out there. One of the most exciting things I would tell you is that we have launched just recently jars on our website. And so we're really excited about having these jars where you can get them online from us, right? So they're sold in cases. We think that our jars are obviously better than everybody else's, but there's plenty of opinions on that. Our jars are extremely thick in nature. So we have done comparisons out there for the thickness, and it turns out that our thickness here is on average thicker than most other people. And so when you feel our jars, they actually feel like the jars that maybe your mother or your grandmother had, right? I mean, so they're very high quality. One of the other things that's exciting about our business is we created these wonderful things in order to put your jars into, called safe crates. And these safe crates allow you to store your jars without them getting dirty, musty. You can see through them really easily to see that I have a jar and what's in that jar. They come in 6-packs and 12-packs. They stack completely, interchanging with each other. They're great to transport stuff, right? I mean, just be able to go places, take it from down to the farmer's market or wherever you want to go. Again, I said that they're awesome for storing. We've had them stacked as high as 8 high without any issues. But they have lots of other purposes you could do with them. So for example, around the office here, we use them actually to store our extra bands and lids because they make a great place to keep them organized in a great place. So you can really find them very easily. Cindy Ball from your guys' organization had suggested to us of actually making a safe crate that fit a 1/2 gallon. So those who are producing milk or anything else, what a wonderful opportunity to have a 1/2 gallon for storage here. Some other great solutions we've come up with is we have an electric bath canner. Very deep, very wide, takes away that time of having to spend at the stove, adjusting temperatures up, down. Really nice. You just set the temperature and it gets that height when you're done with the water. It's got a nice spigot to be able to release that water so you're not trying to lug a big pan over to the sink. And one of the things that we did along the way is we heard from the customers how they didn't like the opaque top. So coming here shortly, we've relaunched it with a completely glass top. So now you can see actually what's transpiring inside here while it's all being cooking here. Those who aren't into maybe the bath style, other things that we actually have is you can take your sealer, your vacuum sealer, and leveraging an adapter, right? You can do dry storage. And so you can suck that air out, thus leaving you the ability to have berries or things last much longer than 1 or 2 days. The last thing I'm going to show you is we have this wonderful little job here, which is if you wanted to create jams and jellies and you didn't want to sit over the stove stirring and stirring and stirring and stirring, we make this little jam and jelly maker that's just awesome. You set it, you plug it in, you set it to the temperature you want, And inside, it just rotates and it keeps stirring and stirring and stirring until you get to the consistency that you want in order to make your either your jam or your jelly. Wonderful opportunity, wonderful stuff. If you're into making other products, right, you may say, hey, the bath canner is not going to work for me. You'll see that we have a pressure cooker to be able to get what you want. And again, to what June talked about, we have an amazing deal that for all VIP members to get a great discount. I'm sure if you reached out to Cindy Ball, she's got some other promotions and some other timing that she could tell you about to really help you get the products that you really want. I'm just showcasing tonight the jars and the canning equipment, but to June's point, we have hundreds of other items that are available on the homesteading in the homesteading space.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm so excited about those safe crates. I see them and I think of my chalk paints I have in jars and keeping those in there. That way they're all together. So thank you for sharing those things.
Yeah, some of the other things we've actually seen, sorry to interrupt, but has been people using them as starters for planting, right? I mean, one of them is small enough and it's got 24 different places to it to where you can put that in and it's a beautiful place to actually, start your plants early in the season.
Like a mini greenhouse almost.
Mini greenhouse, absolutely, absolutely. Well, the other thing I would just love to hear, in the comments or back up would be, as I stated, we always want to hear from customers and we always want to hear from potential customers. We design all of our products to meet the solutions for what people are trying to get at. And we would love to hear about the pain points that you ladies are actually having, as it would come to either canning or something else, so that we can explore the opportunity to, make products that are really around that. Again, Cindy Ball gave us the suggestion of having the half-gallon safe crate, right? So we're always listening to what consumers want to tell us, so we can be innovative and we can drive everything that we want to get here.
Thank you, Mark. We appreciate it. And thank you for your support of our organization as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, ladies, wasn't that exciting? I know I see those safe crates and the jars, and I think of all of the different things that I could use them for, not just in my kitchen, not just with canning. And a jelly maker, a jam and jelly maker that does the stirring, get out of here. Like, my mind is blown. So be sure to check out the Roots and Harvest website. Miranda has shared that in our chat for you. And again, if you're a VIP member with National Ladies Homestead Gathering, you do get a discount on their products. So thank you again to Mark and to Roots and Harvest for your support of our organization. Okay, so that was fun. Now I'm inspired. My mind is just thinking of all the things to use those for. Speaking of inspiration, we have an online community forum, and that is a safe place where our ladies can come together online in one place. Again, it's women from all over the country, and we gather for interaction, insight, and support from each other. And so make sure you click the link if you're not already a part of our private online community forum. Click that link and get involved. It's free to participate and it's a lot of fun. In that community forum each month, I post a post asking for all of the ladies to share their Atta Girl moments from the month. And an Atta Girl moment is where we cheer each other on. We give each other a pat on the back, and we encourage you for what you've done. It could be something small, something big. Nothing is too small. It doesn't even have to be a success. Maybe you tried something new. So it's so inspiring. I'm always so inspired to see those Atta girls pop up on our community. And so when you're in our community, make sure you find the Atta Girl post to see some of these and the pictures that go along with them. But I'll share a few with you here. Leah shared she finally has a real garden started. She's praying it does well. Robin started a continuous brew kombucha and finding it's much easier than the batch brew. She shared a photo as well. That's something that I'd like to try, so I may reach out to Robin for a little more information. Lisa said she scavenged their property for natives to move to her yard. She absolutely loves bringing the natural beauty of the mountains close to her cottage. She successfully seeded a couple things for the first time. She's so excited about the upcoming growing season. Almost time to get to planting in the wheat straw bales. Jennifer shared that she made homemade shampoo and it turned out great. Her hair is not greasy and it's super soft. Atta girl, ladies. Leah added she tried to make bread. Jennifer's herb babies are sprouting and she shared a picture there as well. Let's see. Chelsea bought 2 cherry trees and a fig tree. They're all producing already. She also propagated fig cuttings, but not sure if they're doing anything yet. She revamped her garden a little, which will cut down on grass maintenance. She'll be processing some meat chickens towards the end of the month or the beginning of May. Can you believe it's May already? Look at all of the things you ladies have done. Oh, here's another one with a neat picture. Jessica finally made use of her large cardboard boxes. I'll be getting mulch later, but she's excited for the garden season. And there's a really cool picture there. Lots of gardening things, winter sewing. I am so inspired by all of that. So, Atta girl ladies, make sure that you visit our community and check out all of those Atta girls and be inspired to see what you can do on your homestead. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Hopefully you all are ready to learn about canning tonight. I am super excited about our speaker. Our speaker has provided a handout and Miranda will be dropping the link to that in our chat as well. That way, if you ladies want additional information, and I'm just pulling up our speaker's introduction. Prepare to be blown away here. Dr. Jocelin Whitaker was born and raised in Orlando, Florida, but happily calls the Belleville, Ohio area home, where she lives with her husband and daughter in the country on a 44-acre organic farm, Schomer Eretz Farm. As a homeschool student, she was able to include her interest in natural medicine in her studies, laying a strong foundation, as well as her personal interest in approaching health from biblical and natural methods. She is a doctor of traditional naturopathy and a doctor of philosophy in natural health, a PhD, as well as having her degrees as a certified aromatherapist, a doctor of biblical medicine, certified nutritional counselor, holistic health practitioner, and a certified chaplain in holistic approaches from, sorry, I lost my place, from New Eden School of Natural Health and Herbal Studies, as well as a certified fertility counselor and a certified bioenergetic technician. She's also the author of a recently published book, The Real Truth About the Danger of Stevia and Xylitol. As a naturopath, her practice is located at their health food homesteading store, where they support the local, natural, organic, and homesteading communities. As a farmer's wife, an avid homesteader, she and her husband facilitate a monthly homesteaders gathering in their community. She cans, gardens, homeschools, knits, crochets, scrapbooks, and more, in addition to raising meat chickens and laying hens, dairy and beef cattle, running a raw milk herd share, and raising their own hay. That's amazing. So, if you will all welcome Jocelin, Dr. Jocelin Whitaker, to our national virtual gathering. We are so pleased to have you, Jocelin, to share your knowledge with us tonight.
Thank you, June. It is truly an honor, and thank you for that lovely introduction. So I'm excited to be with you all tonight. We're going to talk about introduction to canning, and every class that I have taught, my mom and I have taught this canning class together. She and I learned to can together, and we had a lot of fun, and we still can together to this day. So every class we've taught, we start with a very traditional recipe, and it's a lot of fun because I think it helps you to see that canning doesn't have to be overwhelming. So we're going to start with a real basic tongue-in-cheek recipe tonight called elephant stew. Cut one elephant into bite-sized pieces. This will take you about 4 months. Cook over kerosene at 525 degrees until tender, about 5 months long. Add salt and pepper to taste. Cover with brown gravy. This will serve 3,827 people. If more are expected, add 2 rabbits. Do this only if absolutely necessary, as most people do not like hair in their stew. Tip, this stew cans very well. So anyway, I like to have a lot of fun with canning. Canning is very enjoyable. It's a great time, especially if you have a mom, a sister, a friend, a fellow homesteader that you can get in the kitchen with. If you don't, start involving your children if you have children still in the home. And it can be a family affair. Maybe your husband enjoys getting in the kitchen with you. In either way, it can just be you in the kitchen. It can be some quiet time, really enjoying putting away all of your hard work from the garden. So where in the world did canning come from? It's one of those things in homesteading, everybody either cans, wants to learn how to can, maybe is afraid of the pressure canner, but I like to find out, where did things come from? So back in the early 1800s, around 1809, the military of many governments were trying to figure out how they were going to provide their soldiers with better food and more nutrition. And so as a result of that, there became an entire research project. And by 1809, there was actually the first, what we know as canning, being done to put away food for the soldiers and help to prevent health issues that they were experiencing due to their lack of access to fresh fruits and vegetables, as well as meats. And then the next year, we see canning in tin cans, which is where we kind of get that term canning from, coming about. And over time, canning has progressed. It's also lost some of the art because I grew up in a home where my mom saw her great aunt putting things in the freezer and preserving the garden harvest, but she did not learn to can until she was an adult. And I started learning as a preteen and have carried it into the rest of my life. So that's a little bit of history of canning, and we're hopefully going to bring some of that art back today. And if you've never canned, the biggest thing about canning is just to get in the kitchen and try it. It's a lot scarier when you first think about it and say, okay, I need all of these tools and I need all these different parts and pieces. So one of the things that I really tried to get together was a basic list for you of some necessary tools that you would need, and keep it very simple, very basic, because there's lots of great gadgets that you can continue to add. But as a beginner canner, if you've never canned before, and that's the premise I'm going to kind of take. So if you can, hopefully you're going to also glean some new ideas to add to it. But if you've never canned before, keeping it very simple can make it feel a lot less overwhelming for you to get started. So a pressure canner and a hot water bather are your 2 main tools that you're going to need. So I brought my hot water bather, and it's basically a giant stock pot. This thing is pretty big. And inside of here, hopefully you can see it in the video. I'm trying to make sure I hold it up. I'm going to pull this out. pardon the clatter, but this is a wire rack and you can fit 7 jars down in here. And this is what most hot water bather canners actually come with and allow you to then put all your jars in here. This is going to be used for things like jams and jellies, your more acidic foods, including tomatoes. Then when you get to certain vegetables and all of your meats, you're going to be doing what we call pressure canning. And some of you may remember when you were younger that you used a pressure canner even just as a pot to cook meat. I remember my grandma cooking her roast in a pressure canner. So this is a Presto pressure canner. And there are all kinds of brands out there. There's the All-American and the Presto. Those are your 2 largest brands. And there are many other brands out there. And what this is doing is allowing it to completely 100% seal with a gasket for you to be able to pressure can your jars. And this is super important when it gets to a lot of your meat and your low acid foods. Now, in our pressure canner, I have 2 of these plates. And this is one of the specific things I like about the Presto and why I personally chose to use a Presto. Is I can double stack my jars. So the one with the little bubbles on the bottom, if you can see it in the video, this is the bottom plate and it has the bubbles and that keeps it up off the bottom of the pot. You place in the lower part of your pot. Again, I can take my pint jars and I can double stack them and get as many as 18 pint jars in the same pressure canner by using a second completely flat plate. And we're going to talk a few specifics here about pressure canning and some of those things, but I wanted you to be able to see what a pressure canner is and what a hot water bather is. So going down the rest of our canning class notes, we also would want to have a funnel, and I'm going to grab that here. I keep all my tools really handy in the kitchen. So I grabbed out my funnel. I grabbed out my jar lifter, which is a handy dandy way to be able to reach down and grab my jars. And it is literally 100% holding the jar. My hand is not touching it. I'm not supporting it in any way, shape, or form. And this may seem like, okay, well, I can grab the jar. Well, if the water is boiling and steaming, you're not going to want to grab the jar. So this is absolutely one thing you're going to want to have. And then the same thing for the jar lifter. And it has a little magnet at the end that allows it to magnetize to your lids when you're heating them. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit. Obviously, you're going to need jars, lids, rings. You're going to want a case knife or some type of straight type of, basically like a knife shape, even if it's not. You're going to want some clean dishcloths, dish towels, hot mats. You may also want some, I'm going to say, older dish towels that you don't mind getting dirty when you pull jars out of the canner. Sometimes they've got meat grease or other things on the outside of the jar, and so having some older dish towels can be handy. Vinegar and paper towels, and I'm just talking good old-fashioned white vinegar and paper towels. And then any of your canning recipes and guides that you might want to have. And obviously you're going to need what you're going to can, your fruit, your veggies, your meat, any ingredients to a recipe. But it really does not have to be complicated to get started with canning. For me, the scariest thing was actually getting used to working with a pressure canner. And now that I'm used to one, it really does not faze me. So in the handout, I list some of my favorite canning books, and I'm going to talk a lot about the Ball Blue book. And I was actually reading the elephant stew recipe out of the Bountiful Harvest Canning and Freezing Cookbook. And it has a lot of really good, legitimate recipes. It's just a great, fun way to break the ice. But if I had to pick that I was going to only have one canning book on hand, it would have to be the Ball Blue book. And every year they update the cover. This was the one that my parents got me the year I got married. And this is the one that my mom had when she first learned to can. And I don't know if you can see it in the video, but the edges are very well loved. The pages are well loved. There's notes, there's spots, there's splotches. This cookbook is extremely well used. And then you'll find other books that you like. And I listed a few other ones. One I'm going to highlight is the Prepper's Ultimate Food Storage Guide. This book is an excellent combination book. And what I mean by that is the first half lists out all of the things that would be recommended to have on hand for a year's worth of food storage. So whether it's rice, beans, canned meats, all of these different parts and pieces, sugar, salt, and it helps you to calculate whether you're a family of one or a family of six, how much of something you would want as a basic starting point. But the back half of the cookbook is a lot of amazing recipes. And one of the things tonight I'm going to talk about is making chicken noodle-less soup. And that recipe comes from this book. So let's talk a little bit more specifics in regards to canning. So hot water bathing, if you've never canned before, is where I definitely recommend that you start. And this is going to work great for jams and jellies, for fruit-based items. So like if you're canning peaches, peach pie filling, blueberries, anything along those lines. Also your tomatoes. So that's a great way to get started because it's very simple. With a hot water bather, you're going to take your pot and you're going to have it ready for your jars. You just want to make sure it's clean and rinsed out. Sometimes, if you're not putting things up, you may have let your canner sit the first time for the season all over the entire winter. And then you're going to prepare your jars. You want to take empty, clean canning jars. And one trick I was always taught was to choose the size that works for your family. So this is some home canned beef brisket that we have done. And this is a 1.5 pint jar, which fall made me really sad this year. They discontinued it. So a few other manufacturers are starting to work on possibly doing a 1.5 pint. But this size works really well for my family, which is my husband, my daughter, myself, and my mom and my dad. And this is a perfect serving size of the beef brisket for my family. So we try to can based on the size of our family and what we will pretty much go through in one meal, because if there is no refrigeration and it's a grid down situation, I don't have to worry about leftovers. If I'm having company, I can get 2 jars. If I want leftovers, I can get 2 jars. And so portion size can contribute to how big of a jar you may want to use. We can our ground beef in pint jars because an entire pound of ground beef fits nicely in a pint jar. So having various sizes can work extremely well. The beef broth we can in quart jars because that gives us 4 cups of beef broth in 1 jar. So you won't find that you necessarily use just one particular size of jar, but having multiple different sizes of jars depending on the recipe, depending on your family size, the portion sizes that you desire, whether or not you want leftovers, all of those different parts and pieces are going to go into your decision. And the biggest thing is try it. We started doing sloppy joes in pint jars originally, and we found that our family was going through about a 1.5 pints. So we upgraded to the 1.5 pints jars. Well, our daughter is now 7 and she's eating a little larger portions. And on those really hard days on the farm, the guys might need a little bit bigger portions. So now this year, we're going to upgrade to quart jars. So just because you can something in pints one year does not mean you might find a quart to be more convenient the next year. So don't box yourself in or feel that there is a black and white, only one way to can carrots or green beans or meatballs. So we even use 1/2 pint jars for things like our chili sauce, where our recipe that we use this in primarily is meatloaf. And it calls for a 1/2 cup serving size, or I'm sorry, a 1 cup serving size. So a 1/2 pint jar is going to be perfect to hold exactly what our recipe uses. And it's not like I'm making meatloaf multiple times in a couple of weeks. So if I was doing a pint, I would end up losing the other half just because I probably wouldn't make it before it went bad in the refrigerator. So now that I've got my jar size picked out, depending on my recipe, you need to make sure that your jars are completely washed and clean. I don't like to put them in the dishwasher. Some people do, but what we found is over long term, the glass degrades because of the heat of the dishwasher and the way that they're washed. So taking a little bit of good old elbow grease and washing them in your sink with hot soapy water. And I just use an all natural 7th generation dish soap and cleaning my jars, my lids, and my rings. And then you're going to put your flat rings, these are the seals that you're going to use on your jars, into a small pot on the stove of water, and you're going to warm them up. Now, some of the canning books and even the Ball Blue Book have updated it to say that many of the lids no longer require you to heat them. I'm a little old school when it comes to this. I find that it softens the rubber in the sealing process, and I just feel a little more comfortable with it. But depending on the brand of lids that you're using, some of them say that you no longer have to take that step of heating the lids. So I've got my jars ready. I'm going to, after washing them and thoroughly rinsing them, put hot water in them and allow them to sit with that hot water. Because if I've been cooking, let's just say I've been cooking strawberry jam and I'm going to put it in a glass jar, it's going to be helpful to have the jar heated for me to put my strawberry jam in the jar so that the temperatures are a lot closer and I'm not having a shock to the glass of the jar. So canning is literally taking a recipe that you might make in a smaller portion and making it in a big batch and then putting it in multiple jars, wiping the rims thoroughly of the jar. You want to make sure that you wipe 100% of the rim. You also want to make sure in that process that you double check your jars for chips, cracks, or dings. Occasionally, because we've had some of our jars for a while and sometimes we'll get new jars, we will find a little teeny chip or a crack or even a manufacturing air bubble that has caused a divot in the rim of the jar. And if you have anything compromising the integrity of the upper edge of the glass of the jar to the lid, it will not properly seal. And so while it goes against every grain of us as a homesteader to dispose of something, that is a time where you would need to dispose of the jar. Now, you may find that you've got other great uses. You can use it for dry storage. You can use it for a scoop, anything but canning with it. So inspecting your jars as you're filling them, as you're washing them, that's all part of the process. So we've got our jars washed. We've got them heated with some warm water in them. We have got our lids warmed on the stove. We've got our rings ready and they're cleaned. And so we're going to fill our jars using our handy dandy canning funnel to help reduce the amount of items going over the edge and creating more sticky overflow. And that's really the purpose of this. You don't have to have a canning funnel, but it does make it a lot easier because it's less mess on the rim of the jar. Then you're going to take a clean dishcloth, preferably one that you've not used in your soapy water. We always get a fresh one out of the drawer that's wet and wipe off all of the rims of our jars thoroughly, sometimes 2 and 3 times, depending on what it is. If it's a jam or a syrup, you're going to be doing it 2 or 3 times to get all the sugar off. Now, when it comes to meat, I handle the meat jars a little bit differently when I'm wiping the rims. I am going to wipe them with a paper towel one time, and I'm going to take my paper towel. Let me grab one. I'm going to show you this. See, this is why I picked to do it in my kitchen so I could grab supplies if I didn't have something really handy. I'm going to take a paper towel and I'm going to take the first corner and I'm going to wipe my first jar. And then I'm going to take this paper towel and I'm going to turn it and I'm going to wipe the next jar. So every time I'm wiping a jar, I'm using a different section of this paper towel and I would have wet it, made sure it was thoroughly wet. And this will get me through about 8 jars because I can divide it up into like 8 little squares. And this is a half-size paper towel. And that's just the way that I found that works for me. You might find you only get 6 jars off of a paper towel, depending on how messy they are. The goal is to get as much of the any oil or grease residue or any of the meat pieces that you might have left on the rim. Then you're going to take a second paper towel and you're going to wet it with vinegar, white vinegar, not apple cider vinegar. And you're going to repeat, you're going to wipe all of your jars with your white vinegar paper towel. And then you're going to get a third paper towel and you're going to use fresh, clean water on that paper towel, wet it down, and you're going to wipe your jars one more time so there's no vinegar residue left on the jar. The vinegar cuts the grease off of the jar rim. And we had somebody who was shopped our store and they had canned meat and they had over a 50% failure rate of their meat jars. And they were telling us about it and how frustrated they were. And I said, did you use the vinegar trick? And they're like, the what? I'm like, the vinegar trick. You've got to use white vinegar to clean all of your meat jars if you're going to can them. So they went home, did the same recipe, same type of jars, same lids. They used the vinegar, and guess what? They got 100% sealing rate. And when you do can, you may not get 100% sealing rate. Typically, if we are doing 4 batches of, say, 7 jars, that's going to be about 28 jars. We might have all of them seal and we might have 27 of them seal. So if you have a jar or 2 not seal, do not feel like you are a failure. That is entirely part of the process. So pressure canning, I'm going to put my meats and my different things in the pressure canner, but let's finish about the hot water bather. So once I have my jars all ready, I'm going to put them in my hot water bather. And then I'm going to fill my hot water bather all the way up to completely cover whatever size jars I have in here. So if it's pints, I'm going to cover my pint jars plus 1 inch generously. So it needs to be at least 1 inch over the top of your tallest jar. And sometimes you have pint jars and there are a couple different sizes. They might have a little bit of variation. And that's why I say the top of your tallest jar, you want it to be completely covered plus 1 inch. So if there's a variableness of it. And occasionally we have done pints and quarts if we're finishing up like a batch and we had a few pints and a few quarts. You can do that in a hot water bather, but you can't mix sizes in a pressure canner. So then you're going to put the lid on your hot water bather. You're going to bring your water to a boil and following your recipe instructions, which if you're using a canning recipe, is going to tell you how long you should hot water bathe it for. So I'm going to reach over here and I'm going to grab my recipe over here for strawberry jam. And it's really not that difficult. 2 quarts of strawberries and 6 cups of sugar. Wash and crush your strawberries. They don't mention this, but please take your caps off of your strawberries, the green parts. Combine the strawberries and sugar in a large sauce pot. Bring slowly to a boil, stirring until sugar dissolves, cooking rapidly to gelling point, about 40 minutes. As mixture thickens, stir frequently to prevent sticking. Remove from heat, skim foam if necessary. Which we never had to, but it's in the book. Ladle hot jam into your hot jars that you had filled with the hot water after you remove the water. So that way they're all nice and warm. You dump that water out in your sink and then you're ready to fill them with your hot jam. Leave a 1/4 inch headspace. Now they'll say adjust 2-piece caps, and that is your flat lid with the ring that you use in canning. And then you're going to process for 15 minutes in a boiling water canner. And what they're talking about for the 15 minutes is once the canner has come to a rolling boil, a nice hard boil where you're seeing the bubbles come up. So it's not that you're putting it in and you're cooking it for 15 minutes. You're putting it in, bringing it up to the boil. You're seeing all these delightful bubbles happen. You often have to take the lid off, maybe turn it down. Then you start the timer for 15 minutes. Once the timer is up, you come along, turn your stove burner off, take your handy dandy jar lifter and start pulling out your jars. Now at this point, they're still going to have the ring on, and you want to leave the ring on your jars for a minimum of 12 hours. So typically what we'll do is we'll do all of our canning in a day. So let's say I was canning all day today and I've done strawberry jam, maybe I've done some relish, maybe I did some ketchup, and then I'm going to have all my jars sitting on the counter and I'm going to leave them cooling overnight. And then the next day, approximately 12 hours later, I'm going to come in and I'm going to remove the rings from the jars. And when I do that, I'm going to be checking what we call the bubble of the canning lid. And so in the middle of all of your lids, there is a little spot that when the jars are sealing, it kind of goes and sucks in. And that's how it gets this precious seal that you are after in the process of canning. And if you have a jar that you go to remove the ring and you tap this area, the middle part of your lid, and it wiggles, then it did not get a proper seal. And that's okay. If you canned today and you're checking them tomorrow morning, you can put this jar in the refrigerator and you've got lunch made. So don't feel like all is lost, but you want to catch it right away. That's another reason why you want to store your jars without the ring. Some people leave rings on. I remember my great aunt having some old jars that had the rings on and they had like pretty much rusted onto the jars. And so you don't want to do that because if there's any food residue caught underneath it, it'll cause more likely of contamination, rust, damage to the lid. But it can also give you a false seal, and that's what it's called, a false seal, because the ring is holding the edge of your lid. And so it can help it to stay closed when in reality, it's not a true seal. And so by removing the ring, the jar has to maintain the proper seal itself. And this bubble popping up and losing its seal is your sign that the food inside is no longer safe to consume. So if you don't take the ring off, it does leave you at a higher risk of contamination. Some people are like, I'm afraid of canning because of botulism. 2 years ago, I looked up the statistics of botulism. And out of all the cases, I think it was like 1,800 cases of botulism that year. Only 2 were caused from home canned foods. 2. That's less than like 0.1%, extremely low. And when you looked at both of those cases, the one was a jar that had lost its seal and the person still consumed it. And the other one was a where the lid was loose. When they went to take it off, they had left the ring and the lid came off with the ring when they took it off, which would have also popped its seal if they had taken the ring off properly, and they went ahead and consumed it. So if you put all your jars away after you're done canning and you go to grab a jar of green beans and the seal has popped, please do not consume it. I know it's all your hard work and it is so frustrating. We've had it happen to us, but please do not consume that. That is where you really have some concern about how long has it been unsealed? What could have potentially contaminated it? And being sick and having food poisoning is not worth it. And in a year's time frame, we might have 1 or 2 jars that happens to. If you have more than that, then I would be concerned about your seal quality, your storage conditions, and really try to figure out what might be contributing to it. So these are all minor issues that are very manageable. So we've talked about hot water bathing. I want to make sure we have some time for pressure canning. We've already talked about how to clean the jars for meat, which is what we do a lot of in pressure canning, but we also pressure can our green beans. We pressure can our carrots. We pressure can our pie pumpkins. We pressure can whole chicken breast. And let's see, I pressure can whole chicken legs on the bone. This is a jar of 6 chicken legs stuck in here. We've talked about our sloppy joes we can and our broth. This is my chicken noodleless soup, and it has a whole chicken breast in here. It has carrots, onions, celery, spices, and then water that turns into the broth. And it also has some chicken base seasoning mix. And then on the top, I wrote chicken noodleless soup, add 1 cup water and 1.5 ounces of noodles. The one food that does not can well are your flour-based items, especially your noodles. And so when you're making soups that call for noodles, you make them noodleless during the canning process because you can easily store noodles dry on the shelf and then add them when you open the jar. And this is so easy. If we've had a long, hard day on the farm or at our store, you can come home, open the jar, put it in the pot, add another cup of water, add 3 ounces of noodles to it, and bring it to a boil, let the noodles cook, and then you have got this hot soup that everybody thinks you have slaved in the kitchen for a couple of hours making. So there's a lot of great ways that you can play around with your combinations here. And then this is beef and carrots. So the bottom 2/3 is the amount of beef, and then there are carrots on top. And so when you are canning meats, it can be very hard to find recipes because unfortunately, over the years, it has become kind of a taboo subject of canning meats. The Ball Blue Book does still mention a little bit, but it's like 1 or 2 pages. So the general rule of thumb is 10 pounds of pressure and 90 minutes when canning meats. So if you start to search and find different recipes, they may tell you you have to cook your beef before putting it in the jar in order to can it. And we have read all of the old research and all of the old papers, and they never did. So we raw pack our beef. Obviously, you need to be comfortable with what you're doing for your family, but we raw pack our beef. We raw pack our chicken, meaning we have never cooked it. We have literally taken it out of the freezer after it's come home from being butchered. We don't butcher our own chickens in most cases. I just butchered 5 roosters with the rest of the family here a couple weeks ago. Not my favorite job, but I will do it if necessary. And the reason we don't butcher them is in our state, in order for us to sell them in a retail store, we have to take them to a licensed inspected facility. So that is an area I get to cheat because since we're doing it for the store, it's just easier to include our own chickens in that process and to take it from the same inventory and not try to separate them. So we'll pull them out of the freezer and just put 4 or 5 legs in a jar. We'll put 4 or 5 thighs of chicken in a jar. We'll put a chicken breast in a pint, all of these different types of things. And so in a pressure canner, you're going to put in the bottom of it 3 quarts of water. So it's totally different than a hot water bather where you are covering your jars and adding an inch past. When you put this, you're going to look and go the first time, is this even enough water? And then you start putting your jars in there and they start coming up higher and you begin to realize that it is enough, but it doesn't fully cover the jars. And that's okay. That's a difference between pressure canning and hot water bathing. So you're going to put 3 quarts. That's what the instructions of the Presto canner that I'm using is. So that is specific. I gave you the quick reference guide link in your canning notes. That is a PDF to the Presto canner instructions. And so it's got some great how-to on that. So we put the 3 quarts of water in there. We put our jars. And if I'm doing pints, I can fit 18 jars of ground beef in my Presto canner. If I'm doing quarts, I can only fit 7. And then I'm gonna let it come up to pressure. I'm gonna put my lid on. I'm gonna bring this over here and hopefully you guys can see it, okay? I'm gonna put my lid on and it has a rotation to it. And you're gonna get it in place. And then you are going to rotate it. And of course, it never wants to work right when you're on a video camera trying to show everybody how to do something, right? You, my dear friend, to do your job. There we go. There we go. And then you're going to rotate to lock your handles in place. Now, if it's not wanting to go down, you always want to check your gasket. So I guess for some reason, it wants me to check the gasket here. Well, all right, so see this little guy that's coming down here? The reason it's not closing is there is a little piece in the front of my pressure canner that this bobble has to lock up to, and I had the lid on. Guess what? It happens to all of us. So now it gently went on and it's locked. It is literally locked in place. So if I take this lid off, I can be pulling at the lid all day long and all it's going to do is bring the pressure canner with me. So I'm going to put this on my stove. I always start with the base on the stove anyhow, because by the time you get 7 quart jars or 18 pints, it's going to be way too much weight to try and move it. And you're going to turn your heat on high and bring it up until this little, hopefully you can see this little nozzle is your steam vent. And you want it to start steaming. And it's going to, as it gains pressure, it will eventually pop. The bobble is what we call it here in the front. It'll pop out. And then you'll start to see steam coming out of your steam vent. And you're going to let that steam come out for 10 minutes. And I always put the timer on because it's very easy to lose track of time. And typically, if you're in the kitchen, you're maybe trying to wash dishes or get some other things put away or get the next batch ready. And so I put the timer on. And then when the 10 minutes is up, you're going to take your weight, which comes with a brand new Presto canner, and drop it on. And this allows it to stop venting and the pressure to begin to climb on the gauge. And this is what's called a gauge-based pressure canner. There are also weighted-based ones. I have never worked with them because, in my opinion, the gauge is much easier than the way you have to learn to understand the jingle and how the weighted ones work. Some people really like them. There's nothing wrong with them. It's totally personal preference and the style that you get used to, often what you learn or the person who taught you was using. So you're going to let it build up until your gauge reads 10 pounds of pressure. Now, when you are pressure canning, it is very important that if it says 10 pounds in a recipe, most recipes for meat are going to say 10 pounds. That's why I'm using that. If it says 10 pounds, I want it to be 10 pounds, 10 and a quarter, 10 and 3/8, no more than 11. But you notice I want it over the 10 pounds. I don't want it under. We listened to a canning class a couple years ago, and the person actually said, if you go under 10 pounds of pressure, you go down to, 9, then you need to start over. You have to turn everything off and you have to start the entire process over. And we have found that to not be true. None of the instructions we've ever read have actually said that. But what you want to do is make sure that you are close. So if I was canning on the stove, I would never really leave the kitchen area unless I just really had to quick run to the bathroom and come right back. But I want to keep a close eye. I might be doing something else, but every minute or two, my eyes are on the pressure canner and the temperature and what the gauge is saying it is for the weight or for the poundage of pressure. And so then I would start to notice, oh, it's creeping down. It's really close to 10. I need to turn my temperature up because once you get to 10 pounds, you're going to have to start turning the temperature down to keep it at 10 pounds and not let it go up to 11 or 12. And so some days when you're pressure canning, you end up playing ping pong ball with your temperature gauge on your stove. And then other days you can get it and it will sit there just like this beautiful little well-behaved puppy dog, and it will stay there and you have to hardly touch it. And you can be doing green beans and you can have one batch that behaves itself and the next batch is all over the place, changing the temperature. But the biggest thing is use your temperature to keep your 10 pounds of pressure at the same place. So that's some of the basics of pressure canning and hot water bathing. We've talked about not storing jars with the rings on. That's super important. And once you do have your jars ready for storage, you want to put them in a cool, dry spot because they've been through all of this temperature to get to the pressure canning process, but you want them to cool down. And then one other thing, once your pressure canner is done with the timer, this is the part I didn't cover quite as well as I'd like to. You're going to turn your heat off. Now, if you have a gas stove, you're going to lose temperature a lot faster than you would on an electric stove. And so some people prefer to can on gas stoves for that reason. We have an electric stove and I love canning on it. I have difficulty with the smell that gas stoves put off. And so you're just going to let it sit there and you're going to go find something else to do because there's nothing you can do. You can't speed it up. Don't try to speed it up. Never a good idea. And you're going to literally let your gauge fall all the way to 0. And then it's just going to keep going. And then eventually this pressure bobble in the front that has popped up when it's pressurized will fall. And this is the best sound in canning because it goes plunk and you know your pressure canner is almost ready. And when it does that plunking sound, kind of similar to what I was making it wiggle and do, you then put the timer on for 10 minutes and you want to just let the jars sit there and kind of finish their thing. And then you're going to gently take your lid and unlatch it. You're going to take your weight off and you're going to do your best to open the lid away from yourself because it's still going to be very hot and steamy. And then your jars are ready for you to lift them out with your jar lifter. So the Pressure canning, hot water bathing, none of them are really that difficult. You're just going to spend more time in the preparation of your foods. And so some people are like, wow, that's a lot of work just for all these jars. But think about it. If I run a pressure canner with 7 jars of chicken legs in it, I have actually cooked 7 meals for my family. And then literally I'm going to take my jar, I'm going to open my lid, I'm going to put it in a pot, and I'm going to heat it for 10 or 15 minutes. And I have got falling off the bone, tender, flavorful chicken ready for my family. And the same thing with pretty much any of our different things. You're literally just opening the jar, whether it's carrots or whether it's the chicken noodle soup or the beef brisket. You're just opening the jar, heating it, and serving it. You typically do not have much to do with it. The beef brisket, we heat it, and then we strain the juice off, and we have barbecue sauce, heat it for a couple more minutes so the sauce coming out of the refrigerator is hot, and off we go. We've got dinner. And people think you have slaved for hours because yes, you have. You put it all into this. So, yes, Miss June, you are ready for questions, aren't you?
Yes. Thank you, Jocelyn. I am going to click over to the Q&A section. We're going to have to scoot through these questions quickly. Let's see what we have here. Someone asked if you would speak about Tattler lids.
I'm not familiar with the brand. There's a lot of smaller companies that have come out after COVID when everybody started canning. So the first thing I would do is ask people that you might know who use the lids, how well they have sealed for them. So we primarily use Ball or another company called Technocap, which one of our wholesale suppliers was able to continue getting through COVID. The Food Independence Summit uses Superb lids. So all of those are good brands that I'm personally familiar with, but I'm sure there are other brands out there, and it's more of just a matter of researching and asking friends and family that might have used it. Or you can buy a box, try it, see what you think, and go from there.
All right, thank you. How about those of us who live at a higher elevation? Do we have a different PSI?
Yes, there is an adaption. The Ball canning book is again going to be your best friend because there is an adaption chart based on your elevation compared to sea level. And we are at the 10 pounds. Some would argue I might have to use 11 pounds in Ohio, but in general, we just stick with the 10 pounds in Ohio. So if you're in Ohio, you get to use 10 pounds. If you're in Colorado, it may be 11 or 12 pounds, but the Ball Blue Book does have a great conversion chart based on your elevation.
Perfect. So someone asked, are all of these recipes like the chicken legs and things from Ball books?
No, and that's where we did have to do some research into. I watched various YouTube videos. I found some old canning books. We have an old canning book called Putting Food By. And I had to find it. I think I might have found it like in one of the used bookstores. And sometimes you can find it online. And they have some of the old recipes, like how you can can pumpkin as a puree, which they would tell you not to do now, but we've done it and we have multiple friends who've done it successfully. So there's other recipe books, especially your old cookbooks that have canning recipes, are going to have more of your meat-based recipes. Also, more of your Mennonite and Amish cookbooks will, because that is how all your Amish families have meat during the winter because they do not have electricity or freezers. So if you've ever wanted to know how can they have meat, they're canning it.
Thank you. Robin bought a property with an old root cellar on it. Does it matter what types of shelves we use when storing our canned goods?
As long as they are strong enough and sturdy enough. The biggest issue is going to be structural capability because canning jars get very heavy once filled with food. Sometimes they can be, 15, 20 pounds for a case of 12. And so you want to be aware of the weight that you are putting on the shelf and the structure of it. So we tend to over overestimate the weights to make sure we're safe for our jars, because there is nothing worse than walking in the pantry and having 30 jars on the floor because you underestimated the weight of your jars.
Can you can the meats and other veggies that you talked about with the hot water bath? That's the only thing Ronnie has currently.
There are a few Amish around us that do it, but you're talking 3 to 4 hours. And everything we've researched says that that's really a very unsafe ideal and highly not recommended. So I would say put on your birthday wish list, Ronnie, for a pressure canner.
How long is it safe to consume any of the foods that have been canned?
Most research is going to say 2 to 5 years, depending on the food, the lid, and the research. Meats we tend to try to use within the 3 to 5 year mark. We have jams and jellies that are like 15 years old and they've still been fine. So there is some variable depending on what it is.
Can you mix jar size in a pressure canner as long as you use the time for the largest jar size?
Technically, you probably could. There would be some concern as to whether you would overpressurize your smaller jars. I only personally do that in a hot water bather because I can remove my smaller jars at the appropriate time without disturbing the larger jars. And with a pressure canner, keeping the jar sizes also allows the temperature to more evenly heat. So I would err on the side of it would not be recommended.
Okay. And can you use a smooth cooktop for canning?
Unfortunately, no. The way they design the smooth cooktops, your cooktop will crack. It is not recommended. So some people have gotten a second, less expensive electric or propane stove and put it out in their garage just for canning. So there's some different options that you can come up with. And that's one reason why we have an electric coil stove.
Perfect. And then do you know anything about the Instant Pot canning feature? Someone got one, they thought they could use it like a pressure canner, but now they think that that's not the case. So I didn't know if you knew anything about that.
I'm not familiar with that, but I do know that you can do, I think if you set it on the canning setting, it's supposed to be like you put it in a pressure canner and canned it. So it's going to kind of act like you've canned it, but you wouldn't want to put the jars in there for canning. There was some talk about being able to do 2 or 3 jars in an Instapot, but then it really didn't seem like it developed into something. So it's not something I'm super familiar with, but I don't think as of right now you can. So that would be great. I'd love one.
All right, that looks like all of the questions that we had in the Q&A. Thank you, ladies, for your questions. Jocelyn, you are just a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for coming on to share with us this evening.
Thank you for having me. It was an incredible honor and hope everyone has a wonderful night tonight.
Thank you. Okay, so I also wanted to mention thanks again to Mark at Roots and Harvest for coming on to share about what they have there. How cool. Make sure you go and check out their website. Thank you all for joining us. And make sure that you click the link that Miranda has dropped in our chat there to register for next month. It's Wednesday, June 5th. It looks like the topic will be beauty from the kitchen, crafting natural skincare. So again, thank you so much for spending your Wednesday evening with us. And click that link and get registered for the next time. I hope you have a great week. Thank you, ladies. Good night.